Okay, well, I guess we better take our seats, or you already have, apart from Stuart and Jean. Obviously, people are going to come back from drift back in. So, great start to the day, I think. I think the keynotes really contextualised us well, and I think the discussion finally about piracy has made it into not just this event, but into the wider streaming media brand, which I think is long overdue. I think regulation is going to be the next big thing I'm going to break, so there's a sneak preview for what I might put into the programming for next year. So now we move on to two sessions which are kind of cornerstones of these events, the infrastructure trends and the application trends panels. And the first up is going to be the infrastructure trends panel. So this was traditionally very much looking at the infrastructure in the content distribution network environment, but widening it out with the title Video Infrastructure Summit now. We can look at other aspects of that whole infrastructure model. So we may find some discussion about different ingest technologies, the cell muxes and so on. I'll leave Eric to lead that. So I think with no further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Eric to introduce the infrastructure trends panel.
Thanks, Tom. First off, James Blessing from Limelight extends his regrets. He's sick today and was unable to make it, but Maria has graciously offered to step in. And as Dom said, the nature of this panel will reflect in some ways the changing nature of this event, which, as we said this morning, and for those of you who've been here before, used to be called the Content Delivery Summit and focused squarely on, especially the first year we held it, content delivery networks. I'm not sure if CDN or content delivery networks even came up this morning, which I think says a lot about the way things are changing, and which is why the panelists here today will come at content delivery and infrastructure from a variety of different angles. And so what I'd first like to do is just ask each panelist to briefly introduce themselves, tell a bit about what they do, what their experience is in the industry, and how they come at content delivery or infrastructure. And then I'll kick it off with some questions. So Rob, could you begin?
Yes, hi everybody. My name's Rob McManus. I'm a product marketing manager at Nokia Siemens Networks. So Nokia Siemens Networks was formed 2007 from Nokia Networks and Siemens Comms. So we're very much a telecoms infrastructure provider. I'm from the mobile broadband business unit, so I'm spending most of my time with the tier 1 mobile guys all over the world. So I'm coming at this from the perspective of how this content or content delivery, specifically video, is hurting these tier 1 mobile operators. So these guys need to manage obviously the capacity increases, which results obviously in increased and continued investment, but it's also about monetizing. So how can the operators turn this challenge into an opportunity? So that's my perspective on this.
Thanks, Rob. I'm Steve Miller-Jones. I'm sitting here today from Rightster. Rightster is a company focused on simplifying the distribution, management and monetization of live and on-demand video content online. We aim to, through providing ad sales, publisher outreach, audience development and workflow applications, help companies make the most money out of their content, the most revenue from their content, and also give control to content publishers through their online distribution channels. It might seem odd given the background to this panel as to why I'm here. My background is firmly and squarely in the CDN industry. I've worked at Limelight Networks for the last 2.5 years, both in the operations group and as the EMEA Director for Solution Engineering. And previously to that, I actually worked with Dom at Global Mix for a number of years. My perspective today on this is thinking about how the vast variety of devices may be impacting the types of input to the systems that are needed, and also how those systems need to scale to be effective in delivering that to an ever wider and more varied and more mobile population. I suppose my most proud, or one of my proudest moments of streaming, was winning the CDN award at Streaming Media Europe for the best CDN in European CDN in 2009. And also I was the lead ops engineer at Limelight for the Royal Wedding.
Hi, I'm Maria Ingold. I'll keep this brief for those of you who missed the entire explanation of the keynote earlier. I'm the ex-head of technology for Filmflex Movies. In June, I left to set up my own technical consultancy in video on demand. From the CDN perspective, what we're focused on looking at around movie delivery is quality, looking at keeping costs down and making sure that the delivery model is secure enough for the studios.
Hello, I'm Yaroslav Gorodetsky. Looks like I'm here the only pure play CDN at this stage. We started in the beginning of 2010. We used to be a Russian first streaming service CDN, but now we've built a global CDN basically because Russian-speaking people live around the globe. So most of our revenues come from Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and we are very focused on TV and video in general delivery. Most of our customers are TV channels, TV networks. We have quite a sophisticated API for providing very value-added services to TVs, to TV channels we have our own video platform capable of delivering pseudo TV streams from the files, making on-the-fly transcoding and small video on-demand editing in the cloud. Some smaller services like thumbnail creation and so on. We are, as I said, we are pure play CDN. We have pretty much similar CDN model as Akamai, so we put our servers deep inside operators network. Okay.
Thank you. Let's begin by sort of taking a look at the big picture. The number that gets cited, one of the numbers that gets cited most frequently in the world of online video is that Netflix in North America accounts for something like 32% of all bandwidth used, all downstream bandwidth used during peak internet use hours. There's been increased, and that's just one example. Obviously, with events like the Olympics, the royal wedding, the kind of and amount of long-form content that's being consumed by people delivered via IP has shot up exponentially. How is that affecting, what's the impact been on the infrastructure from content delivery networks to mobile networks, and how are those facilities dealing with this incredible increase in bandwidth for long-form content? Rob, do you want to start with your perspective?
Certainly, okay. It certainly has been or caused a significant impact, catastrophic in some places on many networks. We all love statistics, so just to throw a few of those in from my perspective, mobile networks have to increase fourfold roughly in terms of capacity by 2015 to cope with what we're seeing today. By 2020, we're looking at a 30-fold increase in terms of capacity, and that's just crazy. The investment needed for that sort of increase in capacity would be phenomenal. So the mobile operators are really hurting in this respect. So they need to really look at their networks, how they can make them more efficient in terms of technology, in terms of content delivery, in terms of infrastructure. But the other thing they need to do as well is to make money from it. And for those that follow Nokia Siemens Networks, we recently, in the last sort of few weeks, launched our sort of next marketing campaign, which is essentially quite simple: how to make money from mobile broadband. And one of our strap lines as part of that campaign is, how do you make money by when users or subscribers are going to consume roughly in the region of 1 gigabit per user per day by 2020. So that's a phenomenal amount of capacity, and mobile networks and mobile operators need to respond to that. So there's a massive impact in terms of the video content on mobile networks, and that needs to be dealt with. And the other side of the coin is these OTT, these over-the-top providers, and the relationship between over-the-top providers and mobile operators is not a good one today. there's usually a triangle, as I would sort of draw it on the board. You've got the operators having a relationship with the subscribers, and the OTTs having a similar relationship with the subscribers, and we don't really have a linkage in between the operator and the OTT. But that's changing. I'm certainly seeing a lot of our customers coming to us to try and broker a relationship between the operators and the OTTs. In terms of content, what you're starting to see now, and I think you'll start to see more of it, is more relationships between the operators and the OTT. So then you have to ask yourself, well, why would an OTT be interested in coming up with some agreement, some revenue share thing with an operator? Predominantly and primarily, the operator is in a very good and very unique position because they control this last mile connectivity between the end user and the content, and they can put on top of that all sorts of value add services, for example, quality of service. They can put in SLAs, those sorts of things. So if the operator can give this guarantee, if you like, that a certain OTT's content will get to the end user at a certain time of day, say for example in congested peak hour times, then that's quite an interesting and compelling story for the OTT. So there's a lot of discussion at the moment with regard to the mobile operators and the OTTs coming up with these, let's call them revenue share agreements, or agreements in terms of how they deliver content over the mobile network.
Are you seeing, on the mobile networks, are you seeing a lot of consumption of long form content? I can really see the short form news clip, YouTube clip, short, 2-3 minute clips being consumed. Are people watching a 1.5 hour movie on a cell, or are they using their Wi-Fi?
Yeah. They tend to use the Wi-Fi. It does tend to be short form. So from statistics that I've got in this big pile of paper here, what we're seeing is people will download something from YouTube and probably watch 10 seconds to a minute, and then they'll discard it. Again, that's a real headache at the moment for mobile guys, because all that content's already been pushed down into the mobile network. So we're looking at solutions to try and just download literally sort of 10-20% of a video. So when users do typically tend to discard it, the impact on the mobile network is obviously significantly less.
So that's pretty interesting. I think that applies back into what I've seen in the CDN world of the challenge with large long tail libraries, which all of the long form libraries typically are, is going to be that the CDNs or any intermediate cache doesn't really want to pull that whole long form movie into cache in case the user abandons after 5 minutes. They've wasted a load of bandwidth, a load of connection to origin time, and a load of cache disk space and churn on caching a movie they didn't need to cache. So there's been a lot of focus, say you're still using Netflix as the example. If you use a tool like Charles Proxy to watch what Netflix player is doing while you're watching a video, it's getting itself a little manifest, much like an HLS or HDS delivery, and it's requesting byte ranges. And the delivery CDN, and they use multiple CDNs, are supporting the use of byte ranges to turn a long form file into short, sharp chunks that can be very efficiently cached and easily load balanced across the globe on the CDN, and that also minimizes the connection to origin. So I think this is, in the short form world, going back onto mobile, I think that's probably going to be a similar approach. And the more and more you look at even the YouTube players, where they used to download the whole 2-minute clip as quick as you could think, they're only just getting ahead of you now in the little scrub bar while you're watching a film. So I think, or even a short clip. So I think everyone's going towards the chunked delivery, the byte range request oriented delivery, and this gives some answers to what's going to happen to CDN scale or carrier network scale. And it's going to be lots and lots and lots of small objects, very easily cached, very easily spread and managed, rather than lots of large, big files that are being moved around the world. That's what I think the impact is.
And actually, this is something that we've already done, because we started later than major Western CDNs. So we already use chunk delivery only chunk delivery for video on demand for large files, because otherwise it doesn't work very well and it's not very efficient. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But of course, that kind of goes out the window for large-scale live events, doesn't it? Or at least it becomes a different sort of challenge when you're delivering a live event. Can you use chunk to delivery in the same way? And if you can't, how do you deal with the proliferation of live events that consumers want, whether it's sports or events like the Royal Wedding?
So I think you have to look at, it's certainly it's capable of being done using the chunk technologies. So there's no issue from a technology stack perspective. Can you do a live HDS stream? Yes, you can. Live smooth stream? Yes, you can. Live HLS? Yes, you can. I think the challenge comes with what you call the thundering herd mentality. So if we take the Olympics as an example, what was happening when it was 3 in the afternoon and it was the cycling final? There was the cycling final, gold medal, with you know, the GB team in chase for some medals. There was what's so-called a thundering herd. So the challenge is to deploy caching techniques that are sustainable, that you can take the connection to the edge, but you're not just sending all of that to origin. I mean, you know, you don't want all of those people bypassing all the caching layers that are in place, be they transparent, be they in the cells, or the mobile networks, be they in the CDN or even in the carrier. You want them held there while they're talking to origin on a much lower, you know, one-to-many relationship. So that's the key, I think, to successfully delivering live events using chunk technology has got to be around how do you control sending all of that herd who arrive at roughly the same time to the origin. How do you control that? And I think all the CDNs probably use different techniques of the same variety to achieve that. But I think that's the key, and it does work.
I think a tree should be used, so maybe a tree of two nodes between the edge and the origin. There should be another layer of, say, pre-origin or federated origin. I don't know the exact. We should invent the exact word for this, but yeah, it's something that should be studied, but it's feasible. We are trying to get the right thing now, because we were showing both Euro 2012 and the Olympics for Russia, and we had this problem, and we think we have solved them now, but we wait until the next Olympic Games to check if it really works. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Rob, you mentioned, you know, that one of your goals and one of the things that needs to happen is that delivery has to get more efficient and therefore more monetizable. And Maria, at FilmFlex, one of your charges was certainly to make the delivery of large files more cost effective, right? Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges and opportunities presented by trying to achieve those bandwidth / cost savings at ingest versus achieving them upon delivery or closer to the edge? The pros and cons, or does it have to be a holistic approach from beginning to end?
Well, from my perspective, which of course is from the mobile operator, what I'm seeing at the moment is, do we build our own CDN? Do we rent the capacity? So those sorts of discussions are going on. Do we partner with a content provider? Do we partner with a CDN? Do we do both? And actually, I think the way it will go from early sort of days that we're seeing at the moment is it'll be a combination of things. So some operators will want to build their own CDN and put their own content within that CDN, and there's been mixed reviews on the success of that model at the moment. Again, I've got some information here with regard to Orange. So Orange are actually saying that their own provided content delivered over their own CDN isn't that sort of successful in terms of popularity. However, if it's a big tier 1 operator that perhaps is also a fixed player as well as a mobile player, for example, Deutsche Telekom, then they've got a lot of fixed assets that they can reuse in terms of the mobile stuff. So it will differ depending on which mobile operator you're talking to. But I think what I see at the moment is there'll be a combination of different models depending on who you are. Some operators will build their own CDN and add their own content in, and that's going to be of interest to some of the big OTTs as well, because the OTTs just can't get into some of the places that the mobile operators can get into. And the other fundamental thing here, and what's really of interest certainly to the OTTs, is the operator's knowledge of the user. So the operator has this vast knowledge of the user, their behaviour, their consumption patterns, where this person goes at 8 o'clock in the morning till 12 o'clock at night, and that information is right now being harnessed from certainly solutions that we can provide to operators called customer experience management, And if that information can then be packaged, if you like, and given to OTTs, they're going to pay for that, because OTTs really don't know what the users are doing, what the subscriber patterns and behaviours are. So those sorts of things, those sorts of value adds from the mobile operator domain are now becoming very prevalent here.
Yeah, so what I'm seeing around that is, of course, Netflix came up with their own CDN. Amazon's got theirs. They're now reselling it. You've got places in the UK like SimpleStream that have developed their own CDN, which is a local CDN, and then they're delivering over-the-top services using that, and then looking for doing other things globally, partnering with other CDNs. You've got the BBC doing their own CDN, but then using 3 other CDNs. You're starting to see the CDN brokering come into play to allow people to not have to manage this moving and shifting between all the different CDNs, and then at the same time bringing in exactly that kind of analytics level stuff that they have access to at that specific level, and providing that as the value service, so you know whether or not the quality is good, if you should flip to another CDN, and also, I mean, I know the BBC use it to adjust pricing, for example, so they know they'll shift to whichever one is giving them the best price at that particular time.
What impact do you see content, groups like Amazon and Netflix, who are licensing content, delivering content, what impact do you see them developing their own CDNs, particularly Netflix, because Amazon clearly has developed its CDN as part of a larger cloud offering that it brings to potential customers as well. But when a company like Netflix decides to build out its own CDN, what impact does that then have on both pure play CDNs, mobile networks, and everyone in between, I guess?
In my mind, we in Russia have this the same story with major Russian content providers who tend to build their own CDNs because it's more closer to Russian mentality, where we have a lot of good developers and not so good managers. So that's why most of big players, internet companies, build their own CDNs. So how we fight with it, how we cope with it, we just give them we try to be very flexible. We give them the service they want to have. Like one of our big customers build their own CDN, but is still using us for off-peak loads and for some transcoding services. So of course, the revenues could lower in general to the CDN industry, but I think CDNs still have to have something to offer to those customers who build their own CDNs.
No, I kind of agree with that. I think there's the back-off arguments of if we build our own CDN and then we have a problem, what do we do? So there's always the reach of the different CDNs is different. Certainly the larger CDNs have a different type of footprint to each other, as do the smaller CDNs, and they all have a different kind of reach. And so that plays to the mobile networks as well, is which CDNs are better placed to service a mobile audience versus a static geographic audience. As in the case of Netflix, it's typically consumed Sunday evening at home. That's the peak. Everyone's not moving. Everyone's probably just about on Wi-Fi, apart from maybe a few. I think the interesting piece is thinking about, if we look at it the other way around, you have a CDN who either built small clusters of servers that they put everywhere and interconnect via great algorithms, or they've built some kind of interconnected network on borrowed or bought backbone infrastructure. And the real question, they don't, other than one of them, don't pretend to be carriers. They're not trying to control the last mile, typically. So the question really comes back to then you're a content owner of some description, you own an audience and you want to distribute your content to them, but do you have the skills to run a CDN at a global scale that will deliver the kind of traffic that Netflix deliver? They clearly think that that's an industry that is of benefit to them to be in. There's a bottom line benefit to this, but I wonder if they consider that it will be, I'm sure they do, but it's going to be a significant challenge to build an infrastructure of the scale they're going to need to deliver at the volumes they deliver. Your statistic, I don't believe, is wrong. The bell curve is there on a Sunday night, but the statistic is pretty much accurate. So can they employ the skills they need to deliver that much traffic, and is it actually in their interest to do that over and above maintaining and developing the relationship with the content owners to actually distribute that content and owning their audience? I question whether that is going to, in the long run, be in their benefit or not.
As you start getting into ownership and having, like DEC, where you have to provide unlimited streaming and things like that, that's maybe when you want to say, well, out of the percentage of what I've sold this for, every time I stream something, it's going to cost me this much. So if I build my architecture that allows me to do that, then, you know, especially if you're doing Disney content and you have children, then, you know, children watch content a lot. So if you're doing that kind of streaming, then you might want to consider having something where you've got more control over the cost.
Yeah, I think the cost basis, if you can make that decision and yours is cheaper, I think that's a good point to make. And if you're closer to the audiences that you're delivering to, then maybe your last mile is cheaper and you can deliver, you know, high quality if that's going to earn you money as well. But, you know, if you look at the statistics of, I think the top 3 CDNs deliver more traffic than the next 10 combined. Are you going to get the economy of scale and the economy of scope on the pricing level that those large CDNs can do, who already have either a global backbone network or who have built up their relationship of global interconnects to make that work for them? So maybe they're going to develop an audience in some part of the world where it's not quite that developed, and maybe that's their target is for new and emerging markets where it's not as evolved as maybe, you know, Western Europe to a degree, North Africa and Asia and the US. I don't know.
Well, certainly as content owners are finding that, you know, the technical workflow for preparing content is recently being taken off their shoulders into various cloud-based offerings. That means, though, that content owners are demanding more from content delivery networks, from other cloud services. What are your various companies, or what do you see, if you're an observer or, Maria, a consultant, what do you see networks, CDNs, and telcos doing to keep up with the demand that content owners have for them to take over the workflow to prepare content for multiple devices, multiple bit rates, multiple formats, and on down the line, multiple DRM schemes?
So I guess I'll start that one. I think the creation and the emergence of cloud workflows has really simplified a lot of things for a lot of people. And you can see if you watch the headlines of the CDNs, they're all moving into SaaS or have moved into software as a service options to bolster their bottom lines and their margins by trying to own more of the relationship with the content producers. So, you know, the commoditization of bits and bytes means their revenues are being shrunk, and if Akamai's revenues are pretty significant. But if they still want to move into their relationship closer to the content owners, the content producers, and someone like Rightster, that's precisely what we're doing. We're trying to help these people take their content, move it through a workflow that they may not have, again, the skills or inclination in-house to do, because it's beyond what their core competence is. And it's this idea that cloud services can bring core competencies towards you in a way that you couldn't do maybe even 5 years ago. You'd have to build, buy, and install a bunch of servers somewhere that you then had to maintain. So I think it's driving certainly CDNs to look for more ways to own that relationship. I'm not convinced whether or not they are the best people to drive those products, because they then have to, again, reach outside of their core competency of running a CDN and say, yeah, I can run a content management system, I can run an OVP, but we deliver bits and bytes. So I think there are some challenges in the CDN world, I don't know about in the mobile infrastructure.
In terms of relationships, I think there'll be a mixed bag of business models that are adopted. I think, Maria, from your presentation this morning, I made a note of it, content providers are complex entities, and I think the telcos, mobile, the tier ones know that, and they don't know how to handle that. They don't know what to do. Do they want that sort of relationship? Some mobile guys will say, no, we don't. So you'll see some mobile guys wanting that relationship with the content providers, but I think Majority of the mobile guys won't want that complexity. They'll want to deal with the CDNs of this world. Therefore, the CDN handles all that complexity towards the content provider. So the mobile operator then only has a relationship to the CDN guy, and all that complexity is hidden. And then the CDN and the operator then just come up with some revenue share. So it will be a mixed bag, in my opinion, but I think that complexity will be a bit of a put-off for the mobile operators going forward.
Yeah, so at the moment, what a lot of the CDNs are trying to do, exactly what you were saying, is find additional monetization for them. So you've got places like Akamai trying to get the studios to give them master files that they can then transcode from and then provide that content and make that available. You've got the Azure guys trying to put transcoding systems into the cloud. You've got a number of other different systems doing cloud-based transcoding. One of the difficulties, and then some of the other CDNs are essentially saying, send us a mezzanine and we'll handle all of your transcoding. That's a little bit tricky because you don't particularly want to send them all of your mezzanines because there's some security concerns around that. There's concerns that you've been getting all of that content from the studios. Would the CDNs then do anything else with that particular content? So one of the other things that could be done would be potentially around DECE common file format. So you don't have to, the DECE common file format, and I think Alex will probably talk about this a bit more later on, is in the header structure of it, you can reference where the DRM is, so you don't have to do what was being talked about earlier about creating all of these different versions. So you could then have one standard file that's indexed and be able to reference that. So there are possibilities around things like that as well, which could be done.
Yeah, I just can say for ourselves that we are half year after we have been founded, I understood that we need to go to cloud, and we started to develop our own video platform to be able to provide transcoding and all other types of cloud editing services. Because really there is not too much, I believe there is not too much space both for third-party cloud provider and CDN. So CDNs should be able to handle all this, all these issues, and we have already developed on the fly in transcoding for video, so that we get one good quality file and make HTTP streaming in all possible formats as soon as we get this file with live transcoding of bits and bytes, live transcoding of chunks as the users with certain certain connection quality are demanding this file. Okay.
Later on this afternoon, we'll be closing with a session from Alex Zambelli from Microsoft talking about MPEG-DASH, and certainly MPEG-DASH has been one of the hottest topics in our industry for the last 6 to 12 months or so. How do you see MPEG-DASH impacting the ability to deliver to multiple devices using, will it make things more convergent rather than as divergent as they've been because of all the multiple devices and formats? Or do you see MPEG-DASH as sort of a, I hesitate to say end game, but there seems to be more of a popular sense that, okay, we're finally coming towards something that we can all mostly agree on and that's good for most everybody, and can be a standard that we can all live with for delivering content. Where do you see MPEG-DASH affecting what it is you do and the industry in general?
I think if the studios are comfortable with it and more comfortable than they are with, for example, HLS, then having a standard is a good idea. We see what happens in practice.
So, yeah, I think from a content sort of workflow perspective, MPEG-DASH offers some great opportunities, and particularly in the bitstream data. about telemetry of the stream. When is an ad break? What is happening in this video, in this live stream, which feeds those cloud-based workflows or any kind of workflow in any solution, digital installed solution or some Amazon-based system that you may have. The bit stream is critical to being able to create complex and rich experiences for users, and I think that's something that MPEG-DASH is really going to bring to the table that we haven't seen so far, and I think that's driving a lot of convergence because it's a control piece. And you can say, hey, you know what, this has the bit stream that tells you when the commercial break's coming, put in some ads that are suitable for the UK online. And it's been possible, it's been challenging as a workflow to achieve to date. There are a number of pretty cool solutions out there, but it will make it so much easier. So I think Dash brings convergence in that way. I think it offers some challenges as HLS, HDS and Smooth do, and even byte ranging does, in that we've got how many different sized objects do we have in the room, right? Devices, and then you've got TVs, you've got your laptops, you've got all of these different sized things. There are many different objects now for the same piece of content. So the same opening chunk of a video may have 20 objects associated with it, of different resolutions, different bit rates for different devices. And that will continue, and that gives a different challenge and scalability and extensibility in the mobile networks, because you've got to deal with so many more objects for the same thing, whereas before it was RTMP stream, right? One connection, one object, brilliant, or maybe three. Now it's a lot, and I think that gives its own challenges. And I think that, coming back to an earlier discussion about the privacy piece and the encryption options, on-the-fly encryption, I think, it gives everybody this unique object for them, but that creates massive scalability issues for delivering them, because everybody has their own object again. So I kind of wonder if that, MPEG-DASH will get a convergence. Maybe we'll stop seeing this on-the-fly encryption being very popular with the delivery organizations, not maybe with the content owners, because it might be great for them and great for the audience. But I think those things combined will give some issues to scalability, and I think that plays to CDNs and mobile networks quite strongly.
Yeah. As we see, HLS is becoming de facto standard, and even YouTube yesterday, if you have seen the jump from the stratosphere, have shown this in HLS actually. We've tweaked into this streaming protocol. It was HLS, so. We also see a lot of advantages of MPEG-DASH, but if HLS becomes a de facto standard, would the big players adopt MPEG-DASH? It's a question to them. Okay.
And I guess just a final word from me on this one. I mean, at the end of the day, the mobile guy will just say, what's the impact on my network? And as you mentioned there, is it 1 piece, 10 pieces, 20 pieces, 100 pieces? And if it is, where best are those pieces, where do they best reside? Do they reside in the core? Do they reside somewhere in aggregation? It'd be great if they could reside on the base station, and maybe that is the future sort of going forward. Maybe things move closer to the edge of the network, and that attracts again and enhances this relationship that I mentioned between the operator and the OTT. So, and I've seen it through many sort of studies and white papers that are around at the moment. Access to this radio information from an OTT perspective is extremely valuable.
Spent a lot of this morning talking about piracy, and Peter had some great numbers on the impact of piracy on everything from taxes to studio revenues. What's the impact of piracy been on mobile networks, CDNs, and how do you best view, or what do you view as the best solution for solving the piracy challenge in a way that takes some of the pressure off the networks and the CDNs, ISPs to some degree?
From my perspective, although it's not sort of my main remit, I think from the mobile operator's sort of perspective, it's all about deep packet inspection, I guess. The mobile guys having the ability to look at the packet streams and determining what content is what, if it's peer-to-peer, BitTorrent and those sorts of traffic streams, then the mobile operators have the ability then to throttle that content or stop it or do whatever they want to it. But I think one of the biggest challenges that have been coming from the 3G side into LTE is that a lot of the operators have given these unlimited data plans, and that's really sort of put a lot of pressure on the mobile network. So you'll see a lot of operators coming away from these all-you-can-eat data tariffs, and a lot of operators now putting in these tiered pricing levels. So if you want to consume a lot of data, whether it be BitTorrent video, whatever it is, then obviously there's a price to pay for that.
I kind of think that the CDNs have carried and do carry services like Ustream, for example. So, that's essentially a commercially paid for service by Ustream, which delivers potentially pirated content. So there's certainly a challenge to the content distribution networks to deal with that. And certainly you can see on Ustream they have branded channels. Say if they had a Royal Wedding branded channel, for example, where they've done very specific deals and rights deals with both the content owners and the CDNs about how that was going to work out, and the legality of doing that to sort of try and overcome the bump of Ustream being a challenge. I mean, if you get, I think this is probably very valid as an example in Europe for football. If you look at a rights-restricted game which is being shown on TV in Germany, you know it's going to be on Ustream probably 20 to 30 times. And that's going to create a large impact on the infrastructure for the rest of Europe, because those games are the games people want to see. So I think that there is a challenge to the CDNs in how do they police that themselves? Do they just do a deal with Ustream and say, hey, you're liable, it's in our SLA, it's in our MSA, and it just goes down the chain and remain agnostic to the bits and bytes that they're channeling? Or do they take a more proactive stance? I don't know what the answer to that is from the CDN side. What I do think is that there's the other side of the whole argument around piracy, I think, is to do with price elasticity and the idea of what the value, Peter was talking about the value of what was pirated. That assumes that it's related one-to-one for content that was sold. So if there was more price elasticity in the content, would people be so inclined to pirate it? Maybe everyone would earn less money, but maybe the volumes of money that are being discussed are actually grossly overrated. So I wonder if there was more price elasticity in content, that people would be less inclined to pirate, and therefore there would be more consumption of legal content. I wonder if actually that's certainly hand-in-hand discussion with the so-called bad guys who are the conduits for the content.
I'm from Russia, and we have so many piracy that you probably would not imagine. But I'm seeing that all the pirate sites are now, they are trying to find the ways to legalize, and actually I am seeing and even the content owners are not actually seeing them as a threat now, but they are rather see them as the market developers who would, who would make people like using online video OTT services, and then come over and the legal rights owners will come and take this revenue, So I would say that yes, as soon as content owners learn how to do the business on paid content and on themselves better than pirates, there will be no piracy issues, and also maybe there are some companies who are doing right thing, who are doing selective anti-piracy measures, like they are putting bad quality pirate films on P2P networks or on pirate sites, and thus making people not able to watch the content they want to see, because if there are 10 copies of good quality pirate video, there will be like 100 copies of bad quality pirate video, and it will be hard to browse, and to choose the right one. And on some piracy sites already just remove the content if they get the direct message from content owners that this should be removed. Okay, so all the rest base is staying there, but it's how it works in Russia, because the piracy levels are much higher than in other countries. Yeah.
The takedown's quite interesting. I wonder if there's a white elephant in the room that we're not talking about, no one's really talked about while I've been here today, and that's YouTube. So YouTube have one of the, a very fairly advanced rights policy where you can go to arbitration with YouTube and say someone else is streaming my content on your site, go and deal with it, and either give me the money from that or tell them to take it down. They have quite an advanced process, quite organized for dealing with that side of it. And if you believe what they said at MIPCOM last week in their keynote, 800 million people watch something like 4 billion hours of content on YouTube every month. So that's an enormous amount of content. I mean, that puts Netflix in the pale. So they're also obviously part of Google, who have their own wide network. So maybe they're more in control of delivery. But they must impact their content must impact the mobile networks. But then they do have an arbitration process for piracy, for dealing with, hey, you know what, someone else is rebroadcasting my clip, deal with it. So I wonder if there are things that as an industry we should be looking at from them. And they're often not mentioned. They're often, yeah, whatever, YouTube. But I mean, that's a lot of views, it's a lot of people, it's a lot of content.
We've got about 2 minutes left before our next session, so I'd like to open it up to questions from the floor.
On the CDNs, basically, you go to a CDN, you push your content in. What performance metrics are there? How can you measure that CDN is actually delivering your content effectively in terms of enforcing an SLA? And the follow-up question then is about brokerage. You talk about various brokerages, so you decide this CDN isn't very good, you want to change. What brokerage services are there, please?
So most CDNs will certainly offer some kind of header which will tell you if you've got a cache hit or miss, for example. So you could tell if you've got very highly cacheable content, is your origin being pounded by the CDN? You could probably tell that by looking at your origin as well. But the CDN will tell you if you inspect the objects whether or not it's being served from cache. They should be giving you metrics on their portals. They should be able to stand up to their SLAs. And if you're going to use third-party tools, I mean, things like Keynote and Gomez will measure object downloads and give you some kind of measure of availability. And then you can use the in-player tools, Convivas of the world, which will tell you what, according to a small object that Conviva store on everyone's CDN, which CDN should I use now? I don't personally believe it's a great model, but they do tell you which CDN appears to be available right now and is fastest on a ping. Whether or not the CDN is responding to that ping traffic or that small object in the same way they'll respond to your video request, I don't know. But there are a number of tools you can use in your player, in your end position, to tell you what's going on, and side monitoring tools like Gomez, Keynote, you can use to see that trend over time.
Well, just to add to that, there's been a thread on the advanced forum on the streaming media list just this week,
yeah.
I think, on exactly that topic. So it might be, if you're not on that thread, then just chip in the question again and get more information. So that's a good topic.
Also, just say with that internally we are using, we are collecting statistics how many times, or was it buffering or not in the video, and yeah, we are not yet showing it to the customers, but probably will in some period of time.
Just chip in, I'd like to ask a key question. This time last year, the topic was CDN Federation.
You stole my last question.
Repeat it.
No, absolutely. Last year there was a lot of excitement in this room about federated CDN, and in fact there were a couple of people in this room who raised their hands as volunteers for a potential pilot project. That you were one of them. This year no one's talking about federated CDN. What happened? Why was there excitement about it last year? What's happened in the interim? What does the future hold for the idea of federated CDN?
Like we were, I really raised my hands here last year, and we were trying to partner with some global CDN, but no one seemed to be interested. And in the end, we just put our own servers in Western Europe and in the US to come from.
Yeah, I laugh a little bit about the federation thing, because I asked other people who were involved in this industry. I said, "Do you know what CDN federation is?" And everybody's like, "Federation what?" So no, people weren't even familiar with the terminology. And I know Cisco's been running its federation tests. But again, yeah, I agree. I have not heard much about this either. And brokering has sort of come out of that as a way of trying to manage the idea of federating.
So I think the question is, whose federation? So you mentioned Cisco. They have a program for installing hardware within carriers, telcos, to create an interconnected federation of Cisco-oriented CDNs. Edgecast have a very similar model, where they offer carriers and telcos the ability to connect or install a set of Edgecast servers and software and hardware in their networks and interconnect with each other on the Edgecast federated CDN. Limelight and Akamai have managed CDN offerings that they take out to telcos, say, hey, you know what? Set up a Limelight managed CDN in your network and we'll interconnect to it and do backwards, forwards deals in transit. So I think it comes down to whose federation. I think they're out there. I think the challenge is if you get outside of that and start thinking about linking, say, smaller CDNs together, the challenges then come when someone has a problem, who do they call? And when someone is trying to reconcile billing, whose billing model do they use? And finally, something I got from a broadcaster was, if we go and play with a federation, we need to move at the pace of the slowest mover. And so I think that's also a challenge.
And then maybe if operator or mobile operator CDNs become more established, does the same thing happen there? Do operators with their own CDN talk to other operators with their CDNs? And do they connect? And do they not? And how does that relationship work? So I think that's equally a point in the sort of mobile operator domain too. We shall see.
Well, great. Well, we're out of time for this session. So please thank you to all our panelists.